Hmm. Well, hello there. This is Anon Don. I have been sick and also um, back at the whole student thing, so you know how that goes. No show for me this weekend, but since I'm finally getting around to it, I'm gonna be streaming Jim's show. You might get a show from me next week or something. I don't know. It depends on how I'm feeling, how I'm doing moving into the new place, and how our internet is. I haven't tested that yet, so we're gonna see if I can even stream from my house. It will suck if I can't. I think I can. I think we've got um, good enough Wi or good enough internet there to do that. Um, so until I am able to be back with you, here is Jim Cooper with his pre-recorded show. I want to thank all of my listeners for participating in our it's not really a uh oh whoops, give me just a second here. It's not really a consistent show, so we appreciate everybody that does follow along um, live and on the that's not what I wanted on the old Twitters and the YouTubes and all that stuff, guys. Remember to share and like and get us some um, promotion. If you like what we're doing, if you don't, give us a thumbs down, and we'll just we'll keep plugging away. So, without further ado, I'm gonna get rid of this, and here is Jim with his analysis of politics for. I think this is gonna be for the beginning of the year. Yeah, Jim talks about baloney masks and Whitmer's non-transparency and Biden's first year. So, without further ado, here is Mr. Jim Cooper.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Holmes Politicast. I'm Jim. I'll be your host today. I hope everyone's having a great week. Uh, Undoubtedly, though, you're having a better week than Joe Biden. So, as we celebrate his 1 year anniversary in office this week, we will um, get to that in a few minutes, his press conference and a couple of things. But I have some other news to start off with. Um, the first one is just ridiculous. It's just about the downfall of humanity, and then I'll get into some real news. But this is according to CNN Business, and it says that Oscar Mayer's bologna face mask quickly sells out. Uh, this is what it says: if the thought of using a slice of bologna as a moisturizing face mask was tempting, you're out of luck for now. Oscar Mayer's bologna-inspired face mask sold out less than a day after its release on Amazon. Kraft Heinz blamed the shortage on unexpected incredibly high demand and said in a statement that the product would be restocked over the coming days. It is actually the #1 new release in Amazon's beauty and personal care section. Uh, the new product isn't actually a slimy piece of meat. Rather, Kraft Heinz partnered with Soul Mamas, a Korean skincare company, to create a hydrating and restoring hydrogel mask that promotes skin elasticity, improves hydration, and moisture retention. But the tan-colored masks are not actually edible. There is a large warning on the packaging that says "Do not eat bologna masks." Oh, um, so it was a joke. The the $5 skin care product was created as a playful spin on the New Year, New You trope with its meaty take on a self-care space. it's also an homage to those oddball kids in school who would bite out eyes and a mouth on a bologna slice and put it on their face. And yet, okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to read from that. So this is it was a joke and adults took it seriously. I don't know what it is about people that we've just come full circle. We've like hit the edge or the end of humanity. I mean, we're getting dangerously close. I don't know. Rich people and um, I don't know, all these really weird faddish people. I don't know, the baloney treatment. People are just desperate to look. Let me just say this first. People are just desperate to look younger, and I don't understand it. I mean, it's just a phase that the human race is going through, because there was a time, if you look at pictures during the Renaissance, paintings during the Renaissance, I mean, where being heavy was really attractive. I mean, like every woman in those paintings are fat, and that was considered really gorgeous. Thin women were considered unhealthy and like peasants. And now, of course, that's not the case. I mean, we you know uh, we really want thin. Thin is beautiful. Thin is beauty. Um, and we're entering a phase now where, or we're not entering a phase. We're long into a phase now where looking young is really important. I mean, even if you look back, and I've seen some of these things from the 1950s, the 40s and 50s even. I don't know when exactly it changed. I know it was like this in the 50s. I don't know if it was in the middle of the 60s or what that it changed, but in the 50s, I've seen uh, women in game shows and in yearbook photos and being interviewed, for things. And these women are, 16, 17, 18, and they look like they could be pushing 30. Their hairstyles, their clothes. Um, and I talked to, this was years ago when my grandparents were alive. I talked to my grandmother about that, of why women in old movies and older women, I mean, when they were young, look so old. And she said, well, that was desirable. Nobody wanted to be thought of as a child. So women wanted to dress and look like adults. They wanted to fit in with adults. You know, they had, and many of these women behaved like adults because some of them got married at 16 or 17 and already had kids by the time they were 19. So you didn't want to look like a child. You wanted to fit in with other women who were raising families too. So, there was a conscious effort to dress and act very mature, to have hairstyles that made you look older and wiser, not hairstyles that would make you look like a little child. Men were the same way. An 18-year-old man would wear suits and ties everywhere. He would look respectable. He didn't dress, like he was still in junior high school. And he didn't take on activities like he was still in junior high school. He put away childish things and acted like an adult to be in the real world. Today, it's the opposite. I mean, today it's not uncommon to find, a 30-year-old who still lives in his parents' basement and plays video games, which you would expect from, a preteen or an early teenager. It's not uncommon for women to still dress like they're very young. You might have a woman in her 40s still trying to dress like a teenager or in her early 20s, and it just does not work. She just looks horrible. You've got women doing these facelifts, which just destroy their face, trying to look years younger, and they look inhuman. They don't look good at all. But there's this constant quest to redo their eyes and their hair and to look younger. So that's the first thing. That's the first thing that I notice. is that there's this big push to look younger, and so they're doing these ridiculous things like, these things on your face, the Botox. I mean, Botox is now becoming even popular among men, but Botox is extremely popular among rich women and celebrity women, and it's just crazy. I mean, it's a toxin. It's a toxin that will kill you, and that's really what you're injecting these things to, you know to destroy the nerves so that it gets rid of the wrinkles. And I mean, I just don't understand why a person would inject a poison into their body in an attempt to look younger. um, I don't know, I just don't get it. I don't understand it. um, Actually, a lot of guys are the opposite when I think about it, because there's many guys, for some odd reason, I don't know if it's our diet or if it's just that we live in an era where we don't have to work as hard, but it seems like 50% of the people that I know, of the guys that I know, the adults that I know, and honestly, even some of the teen boys that I know in high school, they look like little kids. They look young. And so it's actually kind of the opposite. Like, I know a lot of them grow beards and things to try to make themselves look older, you know, and I was friends with a guy who had a beard, and he shaved it one day. It was during the summer. He shaved his beard, and he was near 30. And I remember he shaved it, and he looked about 14 or 15 years old. I mean, it was just weird. I couldn't believe how young he looked when he got rid of the beard. So actually, with guys, there are a lot of guys who do try to look older because they look so young. They have what's commonly called a baby face, and almost every boy that I know, or every man that I know that has that, hates it because it makes them look so young. They want to be thought of as men, and yet they always look like a little boy. And but so I, but there does seem to be this big push for a lot of people to look young, and I don't quite. I guess I can understand it in some cases, but there just seems to be a real um, like I don't. I'm not going to name any names, but I know a number of women who dye their hair because they've got gray hair, but they don't want to look old. And I won't say who they are because I don't want to embarrass them. But I know a number of women who don't have gray hair because they dye it regularly. Um, there are some men too that have gray hair and they dye it so they look younger. It just kind of strange because 100 years ago or 150 years ago, gray hair on men or women was a sign of wisdom. Uh, there was great respect for the gray or silver haired men and women in a culture because they had wisdom. They had years of experience. They were the ones that you went to for sage advice because they had lived long enough you know to be able to look back and give advice on how to on different decisions, and give advice to young people about education or marriage or raising children or anything. And now it just seems a lot of the opposite. The other thing that I was going to say about the bologna inspired meal is or face mask is there seems to be an obsession with food in our culture. I mean, like it it looks and feels like bologna. It's not edible, but it looks and feels like putting bologna on your face. And I was just thinking the other day, I was in one of those places like Bed Bath and Beyond or something. I don't know. I was there with someone else, and I was just looking at the scented candles that they had. There was a whole array of them, and I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. I mean, I don't think I'd ever have scented candles in my house. I mean, maybe if I was married or something and she wanted them, but I don't think I would ever put scented candles in my house, except maybe at like Christmas time or something. If I was having guests over, I might have some scented candles to set the mood. But just in my everyday life, I wouldn't. do scented candles. My mom does some of them, and this is what I was going to get at. It involves my mom and it involves Bed Bath and Beyond and stuff. But my mom has these that are vanilla scented, and so when I'm over at her house, I can smell them a lot. She'll play or she'll be burning them, and I walk in and it smells like vanilla. Not really so much like vanilla ice cream. It just smells like vanilla in the house. But I saw those in Bed Bath and Beyond, and almost not all of them, but I'd say 95% of them, 95% of those candles were of food. I mean, you had like the ocean breeze and and campfire, but then you had like the pumpkin, and um you had a pumpkin one. There was an apple pie, and I smelt it, and it smelt just like apple pie. They had a lot of desserts. They had birthday cake. They had they had the vanilla. They had strawberry, which smelled like like, well, I don't know if it was strawberry. I don't know. It was red, and it smelled like some fruit. But then they also had some really eclectic ones, like mashed potato and gravy, or um, you know, uh, just really weird, hamburger, and just I'm like, what is this obsession? Like, you want your house to smell like an apple pie. I mean, you want your house to smell like mashed potatoes and gravy, like a Thanksgiving meal. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It just occurred to me, like, at that moment, we have this obsession with food. I mean, you know, we want to smell food. We want to, it's just like, how obese are we as a society where if we're not eating food, we want to smell food in our house just all the time. I want my house to smell like apple pie, birthday cake. I want my house to smell. I mean, like, I don't know. I remember when I was a kid, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was one of my favorite books, and he had this, and Willy Wonka had this gum that you would chew, and it was like a Thanksgiving dinner. So like first round was, like turkey, and then as you chewed it longer, that dissipated, and then it smelled like mashed potatoes and stuffing and things, and then you got the dessert, blueberry pie for dessert. And that's kind of what it reminds me of. Like, you could almost make a whole meal in candles. Like, you could smell the turkey, and then you have another candle for mashed potatoes and gravy, and maybe some cranberry, freshly made biscuits, and then you have the apple pie one. You could almost make a whole meal and just smell a whole meal in your house. It doesn't really overpower it if you actually cook. You can smell different ones. So I don't know. But anyway, it's just this obsession. Of course, it was a joke, and yet people leaped on it, and I just don't understand that. How some of the dumbest things become popular, like the pet rock in the 70s. Like, it was a rock, and people were buying rocks, little rocks. You know, some guy is picking them up off Lake Michigan or wherever he lives, and then he's selling them. And it seems ridiculous today, but there's a lot of things that take off like that, like bottled water. It doesn't seem ridiculous to us now, but there was a time, even, there's an episode of Leave It to Beaver, if you watch, in which it's a really hot, they're suffering a really hot day, and Beaver Cleaver decides that he's going to take water from the hose and go around and sell it to people who are out working, and like people are working on the roads, and lawn people, and he was going to charge them for water, and his father tells him that that's ridiculous. No one's going to buy water when it's free, and number one, it was just ridiculous because nobody would do it. Nobody's going to pay for something that they can get for free. And number two, that it was immoral, because people need water to survive, and it's just immoral to go around and charge them for a basic necessity. I mean, if they're thirsty, the Bible says you should give them water, not you should charge them. And it's just interesting that today that's just a model. Like everyone just accepts bottled water, but at one time that was a ridiculous idea, and somebody, and I'm sure they were told that when they said I'm going to bottle water and sell it, and people said that is ridiculous. Nobody's going to buy water if you can get it for free. Why would they go down to the store and pay $5 for water when they can just turn on the tap and have water for free? And they went ahead. And same thing, I'm sure people said that about pet rocks. Why on earth would why would anyone pay money to buy a rock? I mean, it's just ridiculous. You put it in a little box and you put a cool little title on it, a pet rock, and people are going to buy it. No, nobody's going to buy that. It's just ridiculous to, how jokes can become popular. In fact, in the 70s, there was a song in the disco era called Disco Duck. If any of you are familiar with disco, you'll know that song. It's a cult favorite. It's a really ridiculous song by Rick Dees. And I saw an interview with Rick Dees once, and he said that he wrote that song because he hated disco. And that was all that you could hear on the radio. Disco was so popular that every rock station, everything turned into a disco station. They just played disco all day. And he said he thought disco music was so dumb, and the people who listened to disco music was so dumb, that he wrote a song about a disco duck to mock disco music and disco listeners. And it's a dumb song. But that song became the number one song in the nation. And it just goes to show how people can come up with something idiotic, and yet somehow it can become popular. Something totally idiotic will suddenly become all the rage, and everybody wants them. You think about Beanie Babies. You think about Garbage Pail Kids. When I was a kid, that was the big thing for boys. Cabbage Patch Dolls were real popular for girls. But when I was about 9 years old, Garbage Pail Kids became the in thing. That every boy was buying these things. They were just like baseball cards, except they were Garbage Pail Kids. They would have some kid, and it'd always be, and this is why it probably appealed to boys, it would always be some level of I wouldn't say raunchiness, but gross. It's the only word I could think of. Like they would have titles like Veronica Vomit, about some girl who throws up all the time, and like Atomic or like Toxic Waste Tommy or something, some boy who, there's plays with toxic waste or something. I mean, it'd be nasty. And, girls thought it was the grossest thing in the world. My mom thought it was disgusting. But you would buy these packs, and I don't know how many people there were all together, and they would have a stick of bubble gum in them. But then the boys would trade them. Like, oh, I have a Veronica Vomit. I'll trade you for this one over here, and they just became trading cards, and they were real popular, and they were really disgusting. And I don't know if anyone really liked them. Like, I really didn't like them. It's just, it was the cool thing to do. And so, of course, I did it like every other boy. I mean, you just wanted to fit in. And so, because that became the thing that any boy would ask you, so what Garbage Pail Kids do you have? So, of course, I'm not going to say I don't have any. So I'd have to go out and spend my allowance, which was, I don't know, maybe 25 cents. And I'd buy them. And then, I'd pick out the ones that I already had doubles of, and I'd put them in a different pile so I could carry them around with me. So if somebody asks me, what Garbage Pail Kids do you have? I'd pull out from my back pocket my Garbage Pail Kids. These are the ones that I'm willing to exchange. So, And so I'd look at his, he'd look at mine, and we'd figure out, oh yeah, well, I want to get those, and can I have this one if I give you this one, or stuff like that. And they were just completely disgusting, but they were real popular, and I don't even know whatever happened to them. They probably would be worth something today, maybe, maybe not. I don't know what happened to them, but I didn't really ever enjoy them, but they were just popular. Oh my, I've talked forever about this, but let me just quickly. Um, the Washington Free Beacon has a headline that says Gretchen Whitmer's dark money hypocrisy. After preaching transparency, dim governor partners with dark money nonprofit to raise millions. Michigan Democratic Governor Whitmer's first gubernatorial campaign included a pledge to make the state's government more transparent and removed unlimited spending from politics. 4 years later, her re-election bid is relying on a dark money group that raised $6.5 million from undisclosed donors with no contribution limits. Road to Michigan's Future, a nonprofit group that works in concert with Whitmer's campaign and does not disclose its donors, raised $6.5 million in dark money in 2020 to support the Democrat. Tax filings obtained by the Detroit News show. 2 unnamed contributors combined to give the group more than $1.2 million, while 23 anonymous donors gave at least $100,000. The nonprofit is closely tied to Whitmer. One of its staffers, Heather Ricketts, also serves as the Democrats' campaign treasurer, and Whitmer herself has helped the group raise money. Whitmer's partnership with the nonprofit sharply contradicts the campaign rhetoric that helped send the Democrat to the governor's mansion in the first place. During her 2018 campaign, Whitmer released her Michigan Sunshine Plan, which she said would earn back public confidence by making state government more open, transparent, and accountable. Included in the plan was a pledge to reverse legislation that allows certain political groups to raise and spend unlimited amounts of money. I believe more money in politics is not the answer. And that article goes on if you want to read it. But of course, she was not referring to the Democrats. She was referring to the Republicans. It's not fair that the Republicans can raise all this money against the Democrats, but it is fine for the Democrats to raise all that money against Republicans. In other news, Garrett Soldano, a Republican candidate for governor, is the first candidate to submit signatures. Against to unlock Michigan, is what says. He said, unlike others in the GOP field, he's been fighting Whitmer policies since the start of the pandemic. It's easy to throw your hat in the ring now, but where were you in the beginning? Oh, this is from tweets by David Eggert. He's a correspondent for Michigan government for the Associated Press. He goes on to report, Soldano says, I am not scripted. I don't need a teleprompter. I don't need to run from my basement. I'm out here answering every question that is thrown to me and will continue to do so and be transparent. Soldano said if he's governor, he'll move to ban K-12 mask requirements. It's now left to counties and school districts to decide. He suggests the psychological impact, especially on kids ages 3 to 5. He also said he'd ban the concept known as critical race theories in schools. I can attest to that. I've seen Garrett Soldano on the campaign trail. He does not use a prompter. He does not use notes. He uses his memory primarily, although at one point I do remember his wife lovingly reminded him of something, and he had to add that. He had forgotten. So, but there's nothing wrong with that. He's very good on his feet. He's got well thought out ideas, and he can explain not only what he believes, but why he believes it, which is unlike a lot of politicians. I remember infamously Rick Perry in when was it? Was it 2016? When he ran no, it was 2012 when he ran for president. Mitt Romney ended up getting the nomination, but Rick Perry, who later served as Trump's Secretary of Energy, I remember his campaign imploded during the debate when he said he was going to cut government and he was going to eliminate at least 3 cabinet departments. And he was asked what those 3 cabinet departments was, and he couldn't remember. He listed one, and then he thought for a long time, and then he said he just kept humming and hawing. There's the um, uh, labor, I think he said, and energy, and then he's like, the third one is, I don't know, I can't remember. Oops, and it became obvious to everybody that he was just completely scripted, and he doesn't know what he believes. He just knows what he's told he needs to run on, and that sounded good to eliminate 3 cabinet positions to help balance the budget, but he didn't know which ones they were because he hadn't been really briefed on that, and that's the problem. That and Saldano, of course, knows what he believes and why he believes it. So I can attest to that. He was, he's really good about that. Also, I'm not going to comment much on it. I will just say that today the Theodore Roosevelt statue was removed from front of the New York City's Museum of Natural History, and I don't understand for the life of me why this is happening. Theodore Roosevelt was a progressive Republican, um, which I don't have as much a problem with him. I know the word progressive is a naughty word today in politics. A progressive Democrat is, in my opinion, pretty dangerous. But the progressive Republicans were just pro-environment. They were pro-voting, pro-civil rights, really. They believed in civil rights for black people and for women. They're pro-environment, and they were pro-working person. Theodore Roosevelt broke up monopolies to allow more competition. It was part of his, in economic circles, it's called classically liberal, but the liberal here is an economic liberal, not a social liberal. And this was the main economic system. I mean, it's a part of capitalism. I mean, we've always been a capitalist nation, but there are several different types of capitalism. There is the supply side economics, which is it's more of a neoliberal economic system. That's what President Reagan. It's called, the Democrats derogatorily called it trickle down economics, but it's called supply side. You have the laissez-faire, which was popular in the 1920s, where the government completely stays out of the economy completely. And you also had the Keynesian, which is what FDR put in and what liberals tend to use, and that's where the government infuses the economy with money to help stimulate business, stimulate the economy. But prior to all that, we had a classical liberal system, which is what FDR proposed, and that is the government has to intervene at times to keep the market fair. So it's a fair market, but it's not exactly a free market, because otherwise what had happened was monopolies have been created. Businesses were buying out other businesses. And so the government had to intervene in order to keep the economy fair for everybody, so that you don't have a monopoly, so that you have competition. And that's what FDR did, is he went through and he busted up these huge monopolies. And, so that you would have competition. This competition allowed for better pay for workers, because when there was only one place to work, they could take advantage of employees. So in order to help workers and help our economy and small businesses, he broke them up. So a progressive Republican was actually what a lot of Americans would support today, and that is protecting the environment. I mean, he didn't protect the environment to the degree that it hurt business, but he was, he created national land, federal land, you know, stuff like that. He supported civil rights uh, for black people, for women, and he broke up huge monopolies so there could be competition. So it'll not only help labor, but it helped the citizens have cheaper prices and better, and because of competition, they had better service and better products. And so many times people hear he's a progressive Republican and they think he was basically a Democrat. Um, Today, I mean, I suppose you might argue that the Democrats preach more of those things, but they're not really Democratic ideas. They were actually Republican ideas. You know, so I mean, I don't like to use the term progressive because it's associated with a socially progressive liberals. But if I were to align myself with the Republican Party, I probably would be considered more of a progressive Republican, a classical old Republican, you know, um, not really the Republican Party of today, one who believes in lower taxes, smaller government, um, fair markets, and, civil rights, uh, environmental protections, not pro war. I mean, like Eisenhower is like an Eisenhower Republican, Theodore Roosevelt Republican. Um, they were good people, and so I don't understand for the life of me why they would want to get rid of Theodore Roosevelt's statue. He never did or said anything. I mean, I can't even think of anything Theodore Roosevelt proposed or signed into law or said that would be considered controversial. I mean, like I don't agree with it, but I can understand, Andrew Jackson and the Trail of Tears and his treatment of Native Americans. I can understand Woodrow Wilson and some of his what today would be considered very racist comments. I mean, I don't agree, but I can understand, or Thomas Jefferson, he owned slaves, and George Washington owned slaves. Again, I don't agree, but I can see where maybe I can see their argument. I don't agree with their argument, but I can see where they can say these people were problematic. But Theodore Roosevelt, I, you know, he never said anything that I can think of that was controversial or did anything that was controversial, or that today would be controversial. So I don't understand for the life of me why. I mean, I think it might just be that he's an older white man. Anyway, all right, so we'll finish this up pretty quickly. This is from Political Playbook, and it's probably better than I can explain. They kind of go in through all the things about Biden's press conference this week in his 1-year anniversary of being in office. And it's by Ryan Lizza. He's okay. He leans a little bit liberal, but he's okay. He grew up in New York and went to Berkeley, the University of California, Berkeley. So that should tell you he's slightly to the left, but not extremely. He says there's a lot to unpack from President Joe Biden's marathon press conference in the East Room, but let's start with this statement deep into the 1 hour and 51-minute event. Quote, "You guys have been trying to convince me that I am Bernie Sanders. I'm not. I like him, but I'm not Bernie Sanders. I'm not a socialist. I'm a mainstream Democrat, and I have been," end quote. It wasn't so long ago when White House aides were happy to promote the fact that Sanders, chair of the Budget Committee, wrote the initial Build Back Better legislation in the Senate as a signal to progressives that Biden was truly their champion. The other historical touchstones promoted were FDR and LBJ. One of the newsiest bits from Biden was his grappling with the reality of how his two biggest priorities would need to be drastically scaled back. One, on the Build Back Better bill, Biden said that the expanded child tax credit, the most important progressive achievement in his first year, will need to be jettisoned. Ditto for the federally subsidized community college. This reality has sunk in with important parts of the left. We need to get as much as we can across the finish line, Senator Elizabeth Warren said Wednesday night when asked about Biden, saying that the two issues would be sacrificed. So we need to do what it takes to get every vote. Number two, on voting rights. As the president spoke, Senate Democrats were hours away from rejecting his pitch to scrap the filibuster to pass sweeping voting reform. But Biden set the stage for bipartisan talks on a much narrower package, starting with the reform of the Electoral Count Act. Quote, I predict to you they'll get something done on the electoral reform side of this, Biden said. But rather than judge what's going to get done and not get done, all I can say is I'm going to continue to make the case why it's so important to not turn the electoral process over to political persons who are set up deliberately to change the outcomes of elections, end quote. Some news on that. Senator Mitt Romney gave an update on where the voting rights talks were. Though the White House has never reached out, he said Wednesday night that 10 to 12 senators were involved in talks, and each of them has put together a list of priorities for legislation. Senator Susan Collins is going to convene the group this week, according to Romney and Senator Joe Manchin, and see where there's agreement. Even some of the most forceful Democratic advocates for reforming the filibuster to pass sweeping legislation are already lowering their expectations. Senator Angus King of Maine has been texting with Romney about reforming the ECA. Manchin seems highly engaged in the effort. There's a good win there, he said Wednesday as he left the Senate. I mean, my goodness, that's what caused the insurrection. Okay. Every president complains about White House being a prison. Bill Clinton famously called it the crown jewel of the federal penitentiary system. But Biden has been around a while, 36 years in the Senate and 8 years as VP, and he often spends 3 nights a week at home in Delaware. So this was an unusual complaint. Oh, sorry. I missed a paragraph there where Biden said that he needed to get out of Washington more because of the White House bubble. And that's where they're arguing that it's hard to say he lives in a bubble and needs to get out of the White House more when he spends 3 nights a week in Delaware. He's always leaving Washington for vacation. He also said that he was determined to run in 2024 and have Kamala Harris on the ticket with him. She is going to be my running mate. This is, okay, let me take a break from that for a second to say this is going to be a disaster for him. Unless something drastic happens, he's going to lose because of bets like that. This was the same problem that George H.W. Bush had. He committed to keeping Dan Quayle on the ticket. Dan Quayle, he wanted to be loyal, and he didn't want to look like, he was disloyal by firing his vice president, but Quayle was a huge drag on the ticket. This is going to come back to haunt Biden by announcing in 2022 that in 2024 he's going to have Kamala Harris on his ticket. It is way too early for him to make that prediction. If he wants to be serious candidate, he's going to have to look at where he is in 2024 and what his weaknesses are. Vice presidents are not chosen by their gender, by their looks. They are chosen to balance out a ticket and pick up for a president's or a potential president's weakness. So if you're, Donald Trump chose Mike Pence because Mike Pence was a mainstream establishment Republican and he was an evangelical, which would help people who had problems about this guy who'd never served in office before, who wasn't considered extremely religious, to make them feel more comfortable voting for him. Barack Obama, being one of the nation's youngest presidents, picked an older man of Washington, Joe Biden, to be his running mate to help balance the ticket. So that, you could, it just helped balance by age, and it would help some white people. This is the gospel. It would help some white people who might be hesitant to vote for the first black man to know there would be a white guy who would be the vice president. I know it sounds crass, but that is one of the reasons. Because there might be people who think a black man isn't ready, and they would be comforted by there being a white person. It's the same reason why Hillary Clinton chose Tim Kaine as her running mate. For men who might be hesitant to vote for a woman, but they would know that there's a white guy there there's a man who could help her. There's a lot of things. Regional reasons. There are, and even Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris to, he picked a young woman and a black woman to help balance the ticket to make sure. And again, this sounds crass, but this is how politics works. To make sure black people came out and voted for him. I mean, I know that sounds horrible to say. It sounds really crass. It sounds really cynical, but that is how politics works. It's a very, there's a reason. Barack Obama won 2 terms. He had a huge turnout of the black vote. Hillary Clinton put a white man on her ticket, and blacks did not come out to vote. And so in Washington and political speak, in order to get black people to come out and vote, you had to have a black person on the ticket. And so that's one of the main reasons why he picked. He was going to pick a black person, and then he picked a woman to make history. Because he knew that wasn't something that Donald Trump was going to do. Donald Trump and his administration was seen, whether it was true or not, but seen as a cabinet of old white men. And so by putting a black woman on the ticket, it would ensure the black vote, it would ensure the women vote, and it would set a contrast. Even though both Donald Trump and Biden were the 2 oldest candidates in history to ever run, both of them had younger candidates, and Joe Biden was making history, young black woman. So anyway, it's just dangerous at this point. He needs to wait and see where his deficits are. If he has a problem in foreign policy, it would be better to put on someone with military experience. If there's just so much, that he needs to wait for, because times change and you don't need the same, person on the ticket. Now, I know many of you will say it's pretty common to keep the same person. It's been a long time since they've changed. I think it's not been since Gerald Ford ran and he replaced Nelson Rockefeller with Bob Dole. But historically, it's always been the case. You look to see who you need. So I think that's been devastating. Anyway, he made 2 massive gaffes at his presser, which Michael Kinsley defined the word gaffe as when a politician tells the truth, some obvious truth he isn't supposed to say. First, he said that that a minor incursion into Ukraine by Russian President Vladimir Putin might not be met with drastic response by the West. And second, he said that Putin would indeed invade. My guess is he will move in. He has to do something. And then finally, he added that NATO allies were divided over how to respond. There are differences in NATO as to what countries are willing to do, depending on what happened, the degree to which they're able to go. The White House had to come out very quickly and walk back those comments and saying that if any Russian military forces move across the Ukrainian border, that's a renewed invasion and will be met with a swift, severe, and united response from the United States and our allies. But Ryan Lizza says the damage was already done. We're already hearing from foreign leaders and from Ukraine saying that this was a horrible statement. Our allies in Europe coming forward saying there is no disagreement. If Russia invades Ukraine, there will be war. It will be met with, maybe not war, but it'll be met with strong military action. Biden is wrong. So Biden had to come out because he said that basically, if it'll be okay if Russia goes in there, as long as they don't go in there full force. If they do a minor invasion, that's fine, but a full invasion is what we're concerned about. And so you had Kamala Harris this morning on the Today Show. You had other people out there. Jen Psaki is appearing on Fox News of all places, a place that she swore she would never step foot in a Fox News studio, and now she's out on Fox News saying no, Biden. That's not what Biden was saying. He misspoke. That the truth is, and they're trying to play cleanup because what he did was give a green light to Putin, and I've been saying all along I don't think Putin is going to invade Ukraine. I don't know now because with Biden and his little green light there, and the fact that the administration seems torn about what to do. Biden saying that it doesn't matter if it's small. Others saying it's a big deal. Saying that NATO is torn about what to do. He might use this opportunity because of a weak Biden to say we're going to go in. Um, so, uh, so my predictions all along, I stand by them at the time, but now it is very possible that Putin could invade Ukraine because our president is an idiot and um, should not have been left alone up there for 2 hours to take questions. He should have had somebody, up there to correct him and make sure he didn't say anything stupid. So the other thing that he seems, and the other thing he said was he has no confidence that the election in 2022 here is going to be legitimate. This was another huge blunder. You don't say stuff like that. You saw what happened when Trump said it. The American people have to have faith in their institutions. Our entire country is built on goodwill, on good faith, everything. And Trump did a lot to disrupt that. We have to have good faith in this country. Our entire political and economic system will collapse if we don't have faith. There is so many things that don't make sense in our government and how it works. But in order to keep it working, the American people have to just accept it. There were many questions about voting. There's been many questions about our voting systems for years, but we have to ignore it because if we don't know what will end up happening to this country. We could become a socialist country, we become a dictatorship, we could become a communist country. Because if everybody loses faith and our entire economy, our entire country collapses, who knows what it'll be replaced with? We could lose capitalism. There's a lot of problems with capitalism, but we don't go through and talk about them. We try to shut that down. Because if people lose faith, then our entire economic system will collapse. That's what happened in the Great Depression. Roosevelt, there was a real fear that we would become a communist nation after the Great Depression because it looked like capitalism wasn't working and nothing we were doing was helping. And so one of the reasons why FDR went wild, was to restore faith in our banking system. And I'm not going to get into all that right now, but the stock market, Social Security being a Ponzi scheme, our banking system is very flawed. People don't understand exactly how our banking system works. There's the idea of of people being like on a treadmill, like a rodent on a treadmill. We have to keep people working in dead-end jobs because if we didn't, our economy would collapse. We have to have people. It's just there's just so much that we don't. That if we start having no faith in our institutions, our intelligence agency, I've talked about that before, that you just have to believe our intelligence agencies, even though they're not trustworthy. The FBI is not trustworthy. There's all kinds of things that aren't trustworthy. And don't even get me started on like the JFK assassination and things like that. Our government lies to us. Our government are not the good guys in many ways. But if we don't believe that, if we start believing that our government is the worst government in the world, and we start believing that there's no reason to vote, there's no point in voting, if we start believing that, I could just go down the list. If we start believing those things and Americans lose faith in ourselves, in our institutions, in our country, then we're over as a nation. We're destroyed. And we can't have that. So we tell ourselves lies that aren't always true. Like, I'll just throw this out there, that we always fight for freedom and democracy. That's not true. We don't always, our soldiers aren't always fighting for freedom and democracy and the rule of law. Sometimes we invade nations because we don't like their leader. That has nothing to do with us, because the president doesn't like the leader of that country. And so we invade a nation and overthrow it. But we have to tell ourselves that we don't send our young men and women to die because the president doesn't like another leader of a country. We sent them to die for a noble cause, that they died for the cause of freedom. We fight them over there so that we don't have to fight them over here. That's a lie. Many of our wars had nothing to do with this. Vietnam, Korea, you know, those are two major ones. Our invasion of Grenada, Iraq, Afghanistan. None of those wars were fought for the reasons we claim they were. But we have to believe that, because otherwise we're just a dictatorship nation. We're just a tin pot dictatorship, a banana republic that goes around the world just creating havoc because we can. We're just bullies. Do we really want to believe that about ourselves? No. So we soothe ourselves with the idea that we're always in the right, that Americans are always fighting for higher ideals than just money or oil or petty fights or divisions. That's what I mean. And so when we have presidents coming out and saying that our elections aren't legitimate, it starts that slippery slope of us losing faith in our country. And we might as well be Venezuela then. We might as well. What makes us better than Venezuela? If our elections are all rigged and voting doesn't matter, then how are we any different than Haiti under a banana republic? How are we any different than Kim Jong-un's North Korea? How are we any different? How are we any better? And how can we, so we don't want to go down that road. And that's what Biden did, is by saying this, he's destroying confidence. All right. Well, anyway, I could have more to say on that, but I went way too long in my first segment. So sorry about that. Anyway, I hope everybody has a great week, and I'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
All right. Interesting take from Jim there on what exactly is going on with Joe Biden and um, uh, Donald Trump. I think the Democrats have been eroding faith in elections and our institutions by just abusing them for a long time. But that's neither here nor there, and I'm not here to do a show on that. So, guys, thank you so much for listening to Jim and what he had to say. And we will see you. I don't know if he'll be back for a show this Wednesday, but we'll be back for a show together on the fourth, the fourth at the early or at the latest. So I will see you then. Remember to like and share the content that we do have coming out, and we will see you then. Bye, everybody.